I was.
We got new folks here today? I see new faces, yes. Welcome. This is Hill Country JS. We usually don't get started quite this late, but I only have one car, and I also only have one spouse, and she doesn't get home from work until 7-ish. So that's what's going on there. But tonight we're going to talk about visual regression testing. I don't have too much. I usually start with community announcements and stuff. So does anybody have anything they'd like to throw out there for the community project they're working on, they're looking for help with, or I don't know, something interesting worth noting?
That's the reaction I got.
You already did this. I should have expected that you already did this. That's cool. It's March. I don't know. Something about the sky tonight was different. It's kind of, I don't know. It wasn't rainy. It wasn't sunny. It was sunny earlier. Come on, TV.
It's supposed to turn on by itself. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a crazy concept. TV's do we need to clap our hands?
Turn it on, turn it back off again.
Turn on TV. Usually they're listening, whether they're on or off.
Oh, yeah. With the fake reporting
Right.
off.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. You are familiar with it.
Oh, it's the warm fuzzy feeling. There's always somebody listening.
They care.
Yeah, they care. Just try stop paying your bills. You'll find out who cares.
This makes me worried how much it's moving. Yeah. Okay, so that's HDMI right here with Ethernet cable. Holy, that's new.
Smart TV.
Now there's a best HDMI. Oh no, that's best as well. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So tonight's presentation is on how to get a smart TV to work.
What I'm worried is that my setup is.
Messing with it? Probably.
Yeah.
There are sometimes remotes over here.
The guy didn't tell me where the remote is. Do you want to try to just plug in straight
Into there? Yeah, I could probably stream it from mine, but then we don't get the beautiful video. I could also, nope, not Discord. That's the wrong one. Displays.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Is there,
It says that it's on there. Yeah.
your input, your outputs?
Is it going, so this goes to you, and you split it,
Yeah.
and your split's working? Is your split in the right?
All the lights are on, so I'm gonna say yes.
You know, last time somebody downloaded an app on their phone for Vizio and hooked it up to the TV, got it to work that way. That was quite interesting. What if I try a different USB port, or is this the one that it was in already?
That was the one that it was.
Okay.
How about give the blue cable a try first, just really quick.
But it's not plugged into anything.
So are you plugging that into your system?
I will. If I can get enough length. Is there a power cord? Yeah, I'll put it there.
Yeah.
Anybody want to check those drawers over there for a remote? I know there is a remote here. It did, I mean,
Take something?
it still thinks it's there.
Alright, you got light.
There's no button. What's this button? This is going to be the power thing.
This is the power.
What?
The one that says power.
Yeah, okay, right. The one that says power
Is there anything?
Yes, that's something.
Okay.
I pressed the power button. Was that a good idea?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, let's just see if it works with the other.
Okay, it probably is. Have you tried turning it on?
Apparently that works.
Have you tried plugging it in?
Alright.
Hey, look at that.
There you go.
Genius.
Magic.
Okay, what do we want to cover tonight? We are going to cover visual regression testing. And can everybody see that decently? We can actually turn some of these lights off. Probably the other way. How's that?
That would just kill this one. Oh, no.
Looks like he's doing it. It's him.
Oh, okay.
He's messing with things. Yes, you are. Oh!
Could you hit the button again?
Yeah, apparently that's the...
Actually, it might have been me, but
Mine-
apparently the TV just turns off.
It's just randomly. Do we not have power
No,
plug?
what is this? What is going on?
No, what happened was I flicked the lights and it turned the TV off. So they're hooked up to
Right, yeah,
these
that-
ones.
There's one switch you're not supposed to turn on.
Good to know. Okay, so
That's,
we got some ACE developers here tonight, and then there's me, the non-ACE developer. How many of y'all are familiar with visual regression testing? Excellent. So what I will say might actually sound knowledgeable. I'm Kevin Lamping, if you haven't met me, by the way. I used to run the group. I still do, but I kind of haven't been doing it very well lately, which is why it's kind of a mess. And why there's no pizza here. Basically, you can blame the no pizza on me or the delivery person. But that will be coming soon. Anyway, I do front-end development, but I'm kind of interested in front-end testing as well, and automated testing, so like unit testing and things like that, and how we can use it. But one thing that's piqued my interest not lately, in the past several years, is visual regression testing, and I've been kind of trying it in various ways here and there. So this is a website that myself and another dude named Micah Godbolt, who might be presenting next month, put together. visualregressiontesting.com. It's open source. You can open up issues or pull requests in there. We've had a couple pull requests come through from different people who were interested in it. But it's just a basic site that has articles on visual regression testing, videos, and tools on visual regression testing. So as you can see, we've got 1 or 2 or 20 different tools here that are useful for visual regression testing. And I keep saying that word, but what is it? Well, it's like Spot the Difference for your website. So whatever you're building, you have it built, and like you have a good version of it, and you want to make some changes to it. You want to rework some code or change something behind the scenes, and you don't want the visual style of it to change. You can use visual regression testing to test that. So you take a screenshot of your page before you make your change. Then you take a screenshot of your page after you make the change and compare those two and make sure that everything works well. And the reason we do that is basically because CSS is like this. Just a pain. Every time you change something, it messes stuff up. But this is how it looks. You've got your before picture, your after picture, and the difference is it's on 2 lines here, and so it picks that up. The pink is the difference between the 2 pictures. So that's the basic idea of visual regression testing. There's 100 different ways to do it, and the way that I want to show tonight is with a tool called, not WebDriver CSS, but WebDriver IO with the visual regression service. So WebDriver CSS used to be the way that I would recommend for doing it, but that tool is kind of riding off into the sunset, and now I recommend another way of getting it to work. Okay, WebDriver IO is a automated testing tool that I am super crazy about, and it's a way to write, let's see here, a way to write automated tests for your website. So it works just like a browser works. You go to a URL, you say, I want to get this element and set a value on it to be whatever that value is. And then I want to get all the elements that have that match this selector. And inside of that, I'm going to return whether that element is visible or not. And I'll get the results from that. And then I will do an assertion here. Assertions are ways that you can tell the computer to say, I expect this to match that, and if it doesn't, throw a hissy fit. let me know. So I'm expecting the results.length to be equal to 3. So basically I expect 3 of my links to be visible at this point. And then I'm going to click on that second result because it's 0 index, so it starts at 0, then counts to 1, 2. So I'm going to click that one like you would with your mouse button. And then finally I'm going to get the text of this H1, and I'm going to expect it to be get text. So as what this is WebDriver IO, just running through various commands in an actual browser and making it work. So let's actually copy this over and try it out. We do have to have WebDriver IO running before we can get into the visual regression side of things. So let's see, I will open that up. I'm going to jump into a new terminal window, that pretty little thing. And then let's make a new directory. I'll call it WDIO HCGS. And the only requirements for this so far are that you have Node installed. So Node version 6.5 or 4, that'll work. I'm going to initialize a new NPM repo, and this is so it's going to save my dependencies. So I'm going to install WebDriver IO via NPM, and I want to save it when I do that so that if I start this over again later, I can reinstall it a lot easier. So to do that, I use npm init-y. If you're not familiar with NPM, it's a way of managing software in Node. Node is JavaScript on the server. So that's that. So it created a new package.json file, which has the name of my folder, and then here's the script. We're going to take a look at that in just a second. But before we do that, I'm going to run an install command. I'm going to save to my, save dev WebDriver IO. I'm going to save to my dependencies WebDriver IO. And I think if I can move this up here, that would be better. That way y'all can see it. So it's installing that right now. While that's installing, let's jump over into, well, no, I don't want to do that. Let's do that. Nope, didn't want to do that. Okay, I'm going to open up this JSON file, this package JSON file. And I mentioned this was the one that we just created. So you see here we've got our dev dependency saved of WebDriver IO. WebDriver IO, you can use it 2 different ways. You can require it in your Node.js script itself directly, which is one way, and you see it. You'll reference it through this client object, and you'll do client.init.url.setURL.click.getTitle, and that's a bit different from what you see here, which is more of a step-by-step approach versus kind of chaining it all together down here. I like this approach a lot nicer, or a lot better, because it's cleaner, it's easier to write. I don't know, it's easier to read as well. In order to use that, you have to run the test runner. So the test runner is a command line thing that allows you to, it basically helps setting up WebDriver IO. So with all that said, I'm going to do that. And what that does is, you see in here it does node modules.bin. When I installed WebDriver IO, it installed to my node modules directory. And then if I look in bin, you can see up there there's WDIO. So it installed this command line utility, this way of accessing WebDriver IO through the command line to my bin. So I could do node modules.bin.wdio, and that's going to bring me through my configuration helper because I don't have a configuration file yet. But what I really want to do is not have to type in that node modules.bin all the time, which is my laziness. And to do that, I'm going to run it through an npm script. And this one's going to be called test. So I'm going to say npm test, and it's going to look in that node modules bin folder and find this WDIO executable and run it. So if I go back into here, and let me close out of this. Okay. There and there. Oh. Okay, if I go in here and I run npm test, it's going to run the exact same thing it ran here. So you see here's that WDIO command, which is similar to what that did. So that's what that is. You don't really need to know about that just to make it work, but I did want to mention it. It looks for a configuration file when it gets set up and named wdio.conf.js. And if it doesn't find it, it's going to help you set up the file yourself. So it's going to ask you some questions. Where do I want to execute my test? For today, we'll do it on my local machine. I'm going to use Mocha as my framework. Mocha is a test framework that helps you kind of organize your test suites. So if we jump back here again and go down here to that example, you see the describe and the dot and the it. That's part of Mocha, and it just allows you to organize your tests and some other neat little functionality there. So I'm going to go ahead and use that, and I'm going to say that I do want it to install. It's basically going to do the npm install for us. And then it wants to know where we're going to put our tests. I'll just put it in the test folder. So it's going to say anything that's inside of the test folder that has an extension of JS, those are my tests. Then I've got some reporters. I'll just stick with spec for now. You don't really, spec is a reporter is how it tells you the results of your tests. So spec is a pretty basic one. Here's something important is Selenium standalone. So like I mentioned, this is going to run in a real browser. Well, WebDriver IO needs to interface with that browser, and the way it does that is through Selenium. And you can either start Selenium on your own in this kind of not super confusing way, but not the easiest way, or you can have WebDriver IO take care of it. So when you run your test, it spins up a Selenium instance for you, and then that Selenium instance is what controls the browser and does all those actions for you. So that's the service that I want to add. And then there's also this visual regression service as well, and I'm also going to choose that by hitting spacebar because I want those two services in place. And if you just keep hitting down, it just loops around and around again and again. And yes, I do want it to install for me. I am going to log out the commands so that you can see what happens. Screenshots, if there's an error on the page, it'll take a picture of it and show you that. And then finally my base URL, which is going to be something localhost. Yeah, I know. Let's see. And I need it to be localhost because, oh, there's already weird. I need to be localhost because I want to be able to change the page and have it refresh. So apparently I already have this running, but I don't know where. But I think that should be fine. So basically I have this little dummy website that's just a fake website, but it has some neat little things on it. So what I can do is come in and I can take a picture of these popular products and then make a change to them and compare. And that's what we'll be doing in this example. So this is the website I want to test on. So I'm going to pass that in. I won't have a trailing slash. That'll be in there later. So now it's installing the packages for us. And we'll give it a minute to install. And there we go. So if I run npm test, nothing's really going to happen right now. It's going to say that there's no file there. So, okay, this is a good pausing point for y'all to go get some food. So why don't you go get food? Hmm?
Do you figure out where you're running it?
It's in some terminal that got closed at some point, and
Close
but
to-
it should still work. I should still be able to make it work. So if I go in here and then, I keep hitting one sec.
Can you just slash attach that to YouTube?
You don't want to listen to me.
Presentation.
I guess. Under sample site, and then there we go. Cool. Nice. And pizza tonight is provided by our fine sponsors back there. Do y'all want to say anything?
I mean, we've spoken at a few, but if you aren't familiar with us, we're an IT staffing and services company. Work with companies like USA, Radspace, Wells Fargo, a lot of the health industry, Norman, JCI, things like that. We just like to get out in the community, we focus specifically, me and Joe.
Yeah, sorry I was late. My name is Joe Monroe, Nick's partner. We do the same stuff on the front end, do a little bit of back end as well.
Just like to get out, meet you guys down in the community, but I'm sure we'll reach out to y'all at some point in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So they graciously provide the food for tonight. So and really appreciate it. Yeah. Makes it worth coming out for. Okay.
So y'all are looking for talent, is what you're saying?
What?
Yes, sir.
Cool, is there
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
in the room looking for talent? I mean, like, talent looking for people looking for talent? Probably. Some familiar faces.
Raise your hands.
They weren't in the room at that time.
You too.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. Everybody's happily stuffing their face with pizza, which is great for me. Okay, so where I left off, basically I didn't have a file that matched, and then I also had this error up here saying that I needed to set up visual aggression configuration. So I'm going to jump into my configuration file, which is called wdio.conf.js. So this is a file that WebDriver IO looks at to kind of figure out how your tests are set up. So here you can see this is that value we provided in our configuration where we want to say any file that has a JS extension inside of our test folder, whether it's in a subfolder or just in the plain one, we want to use that as our test. You can also exclude files here, pretty cool stuff. There's this thing called max instances that says if you want to, it helps run your tests faster. So it'll open up multiple browsers to run your tests on if you have the test set up that way.
Is that kicking off stuff with Selenium? Or?
Yeah, yep. And then I'm actually going to test on Chrome because when I test in Firefox, it opens up the browser and it just sits there. There's something messed up with it, and so the easiest solution for me is just to change to Chrome. But yeah, this can be anything that is installed on your system. It could be Firefox, Safari. I don't know about Opera. I don't know. They have to have a Selenium driver hooked in. I think they might have one. But if you're on Windows, the same thing, you can have it test on IE. You can have it test on Phantom.js or Casper.js or something like that. You just define that in your capabilities. So that's one thing that I really like about the tool is that it hooks into Selenium, and Selenium has access to all these different browsers out there. Makes it really powerful. I'm going to skip through some of this stuff because it's just not all that important for tonight. But I do want to jump into my services and basically turn that service off for now so that it doesn't give me this error because I want to show just a basic test first before we get into that. So, okay, that's that. Next thing, I'm going to create a new test. I'll create it in my test subfolder. ST is a shortcut that I made for Sublime Text. It just opens Sublime Text to that file. And then this is just going to be called, let's call it button.js. And in here, I'm going to write a test for my button. So I'm going to describe the shop button. So that's Mocha that you're seeing right there. And then I'm going to say it should look good. And then function. And you know what, before we do that, let's just make sure that it should exist. Okay, so these are JavaScript callbacks that we've got right here. That's the way that Mocha sets things up. You're calling a describe function. You're passing it a string, which is the name of your test, and then a callback, which is your test itself. And then nested inside of that is another function called it. Again, you do the string, which is the name of your text, and then another callback, which is going to be the text itself. We're going to do our browser.url. We'll load the home page. So all we need to do is type that slash because we already told it the URL to go to in here. And then we're going to say browser.element. This is going to find an element on the page. And the element we want to find is this one right here. And we can select it in a bunch of different ways. We could select it by a class name of shop callout. So I could do class of shop callout plus a for anchor tag. I could also do something like an attribute selector, href equals, what's that, product page, .html. You can do it like that. I can even do a text selector. So that could be CRVAS robot selection. So let's actually stick with that. And then I'm going to assign that to a variable. Let's see, shop button, button. And then I'll log that out. And actually I'll log out is existing, which is, no. Oh, I need to make a directory. Try that again. Okay. So is existing is a C existing. I guess that would also work. It's a WebDriver IO command, and you just pass in a selector, or you use it through browser.element.isExisting. You pass in your selector, and it tells you whether it's existing or not. So we could do something like this, where we expect this to be true. We could also do browser.isExisting and pass in the selector in there. And let's look for a bogus element. And so we should get two logs, one saying true, one saying false, because it's going to look for this element and tell you that it's not there. So I'll save that, and let's try running this through our npm test command, which again runs WebDriver IO. WebDriver IO looks for your configuration file. This time it finds it because you made it, and it goes ahead and runs it. And so you should see a browser pop up. You should see Chrome pop up. There it is back there. It loaded my page, and it passed even though it didn't find that element, which is kind of interesting. So I got two false reports back. So these are the commands that WebDriver IO is sending to Selenium. It's telling Selenium, hey, I want you to start a new session. And then Selenium returns with the session ID. That's the browser information. Then it sends another command to Selenium saying, I want you to go to this URL. And then it says, I want you to search for this element. And then it says, I want you to search for these elements. And the same thing goes here. It wants to search for that element. and it gets some data back and everything, and then at the very end it deletes that session. So that's how WebDriver IO talks to Selenium. Pretty cool stuff. So what's going on here? Browser.element equals CRVAS robot selection.
You console the log and didn't assert anything.
Yeah, I didn't assert anything, that's true, but this still should have been true. So I understand that it still passes because I'm not checking anything, I'm just console logging anything, but this should still return true because that should be there.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to try something else called debug. And what's cool about debug is it allows you to kind of pause the script right in the middle of it. Before I do that, my test would time out after 10 seconds. Basically, it would shut itself down because it thought that it froze. So I'm going to set my timeout limit to a really high number. That's going to allow me enough time to just kind of mess around with things. So I need to stop hitting that shortcut key that I'm so used to. Okay, so I'm going to hit npm test. It's going to open my session just like before, and now it's paused here. So I have this CRVAS robot selection, and I can go back into my test and copy that, and then paste that in here, and let's see. So you can see here it made that post out there, and it said it couldn't find that. So maybe my selector's a little bit off. Maybe I need to do a star. No. So what's going on here? So I can inspect in here.
This posts to the session?
Yeah, it posts to the WebDriver, to the Selenium session. So, I mean, my text is there. And if I jump into the WebDriver IO page, I wasn't planning on covering this, but under selectors, they talk about this. So here's link text. You get anchor element with specific text in it. Yeah, you use that. It's quite strange. So the other thing I can try is passing the tag. So it did find it. So for some reason, it didn't like searching it without the element in there. So it's kind of strange. But you see it did find that element now. So I can go ahead and press Command or Control C, Control C. That'll shut down my test, and then I jump back in here and I change that to my button. And now if I pause or get rid of that and then run my test again, it has a true and then a false. So that's good. Now, someone mentioned that it didn't actually fail the test because you didn't assert anything. So we're going to talk about assertions real quick and then jump into visual regression testing. But before I do that, I need to install an assertion library. And that's a way of comparing things. So I'm going to install one called Chai. And you just do Chai. And won't spend too much time on this, but variable expect is equal to require Chai. I'm going to load the Chai library, and then I'm going to get an expect function off of it, which is probably confusing, but to be true, just kind of go with it for now because I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. So I'm going to expect my shop button to be true. So basically expect this to be true. And then I can also expect this to be false. And then if I change this, well, let's just run this right now and make sure that it works. Oh, there we go. So it's going to run our commands, and then I needed to pass that like I'm calling a function. That's what I messed up. Oh, man.
Just closing parentheses around expect.
I am. Good catch. Good catch. Expect to be true is not a function. Okay, so I did part of it right. I shouldn't second guess myself. I should second guess my other self. Okay, so now it's passing, but say I didn't, say I typed that text wrong, it's going to actually show me that it's going to fail because it couldn't find that element. So it searched for the element and it said expected false to be true. So basically that it was looking for it and it couldn't find it. And you can say button should be there. And that's going to give you a little bit better of a error message versus expected false to be true. Now it says button should be there, expected false to be true. So things like that. So I can get rid of that. So we've got our basic test here. It should exist. Now let's go ahead and jump into the visual regression testing part. So I'm going to say it should look good. So both of these, I want them to hit the browser to go to the same URL. So Mocha has this ability to run commands before each of your tests. You just pass in a before each statement. And now, each time it starts a new test, it's going to run this command, which is neat. And then, let's see, C, our vast robot selection, C. And then I could move this up to like, equals that. So I could move that here so that I could share it between the two. But I can do something even better, which is move it there. And now, if I've done this right, I can access shop button in both of them. And you know, I talked about that, and if I remember correctly, the visual regression service isn't set up to use it like that, so I'm gonna have to undo that anyway. Okay, setting up visual regression. They have a little README page, which I'll jump over to, under their services, and then visual regression. That talks about how to get installed. This installation has already ran for us when we installed it via the configuration tool. There's some stuff we got to copy and paste here to get in place. This is one thing I'm not crazy about with the tool, is that there is a little bit of copy paste just to get things in place. Let's see.
Configuration over. Configuration.
Yeah. There was another part of this where I wanted to add the screen width on here, but we'll skip the screen width for the now to get this working. We also have to turn on the visual regression service by just passing it into the services. And then there's also these options we can pass in. So if I just go all the way down to the bottom, and then on a new line, type in visual regression. Now I've got all these different options. So here's that get screenshot name, which is this function up here. And it just gets you the name to save your file to. So I could make this, or get this name myself, but yeah, I just kind of go with what they've got there. There's some other stuff. It pauses between viewport changes, which we're not going to care about because we're only going to take one viewport. But you can take multiple viewports, and that's kind of nice. So you don't have to manually do that. And then there's also some orientations you can pass in. Pretty self-explanatory there. But now I've got my visual regression service set up, and it's going to take screenshots at 1024. And if there's a difference between the pictures that it takes of greater than 0.01%, it's going to complain and say that there's a difference between the two. So how do we actually use this? There are a number of commands that we can pass in. Let's get down here. Check viewport, check document, and check element. I want to check the element, so I'm going to do shop button.check element. And in theory that would work, but it doesn't work. So instead, I've got to do browser.checkelement. And the reason is this browser.element passes information into the next command that you're calling. But because this is a third-party service, this is something that people outside of the main WebDriver IO contributors built, they didn't really build that in. They didn't build in the ability for you to pass in through browser.element. So instead, you just have to pass it in through here. So I'll just go back to that thing that I was saying I was going to do. Shop button selector equals, and then here, I'll pass it in like that, and then the same thing here. So I'm going to run check element right, is what I want. And there's a couple of other things, but basically this is going to take a screenshot. If the screenshot exists, it'll compare it to that screenshot. If not, it will create a new one and go from there. So another cool thing we can do in Mocha is dot only, and that's going to only run this test. So it's going to skip past this test because we already know it passes. We don't care about it right now. We just want to run that test. So we will do that. And let's see if this works. So I'm going to run npm test again. And this time, instead of checking the element, it's going to actually take a screenshot. Here, you see that screenshot command. So WebDriver IO actually took a picture of the page, and then the visual regression service comes in and it slices it down and everything. So I want to take a look at that. I've got this screenshots directory. Let's see if I can open that. Yeah. Except it's really small, but I've got two images. I've got the one that was most recently taken, that's the screen, and then a reference image here. So they're actually the same image right now because you just took the one. But if I were to change this, they would be different images. So let's go ahead and change that. So I'll go into my app.css file. If I look for shop callout, you see it's got font size of 1.5 EMs. Well, that's based off of the body font size. So if I change the body font size to something a bit different, and then I run my test again, let's see if it actually fails the test. I don't know if it's going to fail the test or not. It didn't fail the test, which is okay. But it did create a diff image here. So now this is kind of the difference between the two images. It's kind of weird because there's some weird pink artifacts and stuff. So because it's a font size change, it kind of reports weird. But you can see here's my baseline image and here's my new image. You can see there are definitely different sizes there. That would also, probably a better example, instead of that font size change, going into the index file itself and see our vast robot selection. I was going to get rid of that. That's going to mess up my selector. So let's do that. Okay. Now if I run this, that diff image is going to be a little bit better. So again, it's going to compare to that baseline image instead of, oh gosh. So it couldn't find my selector. Why couldn't it find? Did I save it? I did save it. See our vast robot. That's the problem with using text. So yeah, it couldn't find that selector. So when it tried to find the size of the element, it couldn't find it. Now it can find it. So apparently it doesn't like spaces at the end. Okay, so let's try that again. So here's our baseline image. Here's our new image. You can see the base thing is that they're different text. And then if we look at the differences, again, it's pink because, I don't know, whatever diff service they use to compare the two is not handling it very well between the different image sizes. So that's what's going on there. One last thing, let's see, 811, yeah, let's go. One last thing is we want our test to fail when this check fails. So let's see how we do that. I'm pretty certain that what happens is visual regression, okay. This browser.checkElement returns a status. And then we can log that status out. Oh, not that. npm test. And I'm going to check in here. They have an example in their test file. Yeah, check element will return a report, and then you can do an assertion against that report. So we'll do something just like this. So here's that report that we got back. It's an array of all the different screenshots. We have the mismatch percentage, so that's the difference between the two, whether it's within the tolerance, same dimensions, exact same image, something like that. So in our test here, we can do another expect. So we'll do expect status, and because it's an array, we have to get the first item of that array, and we're just going to check that it's within the mismatch tolerance. So is within mismatch tolerance to be true. So basically, I just want to check that my images are similar enough to pass. So now if I run this, it should fail this time. There we go. So expected false to be true. And again, we could pass in like image should be same, something like that. And then if I go back in here and set that back to what it was it selection? Yeah. And then I run this one more time, so basically I fix the bug that I introduced. It should now pass. Okay, so it should look good, and it does look good, and that's awesome. So yeah, you can expand this pretty far out. You can take it at different widths, so you can pass in manually the widths you want to set to maybe 320 for really small screens, and then 680 for tablets and things like that. And it's going to take pictures at your different screen widths for you. And yeah, there's a bunch of other options you can pass in. Things like you can exclude certain areas of the page from a screenshot, and that was one thing that WebDriver CSS had that was pretty awesome. I'll show you what it looks like here. Okay, so it would, if you used exclude, it would put black bars over certain parts of the page. There's also a way to, you can also hide and remove, I think, are the other ones? Let me double check. Hide and remove. So it'll do different things to remove. And that's really good if you have some dynamic content that changes every single time you run your page. You can basically hide it from the capture. That way it's not creating false positives as far as your tests go, or false negatives. You can also change the mismatch tolerance if you want, and things like that. So it's got some neat little options there. You could just take a picture of the entire viewport or the entire document if you wanted to, not have to worry about individual elements. I like focusing on elements because if I make a change at the top of my page and it bumps this down or something, then I have to worry about the regression is going to be all messed up and everything in that instance. So that's how that works. And what I really like about this being hooked into WebDriver I/O is I can run my command and then do like a browser.click, click the button or click something. So maybe I want to test that these accordions work. So I would take a screenshot of the entire accordion and then click this second item and then take another screenshot and then click back to that one and take another screenshot. And that would like validate that interactive parts worked. Or if I had something where I needed to hover over this in order to get the menu to pop up, I could do that by just adding my normal WebDriver I/O commands in here. And if you're interested, those commands are all here. So you've got things like click, double click, drag and drop. You can right click. You can set cookies if you want to. Let's see, all of these wonderful commands. You can check the state of things and all sorts of stuff to throw. You can switch between tabs, so if you have two tabs open, you can do that. It's kind of cool. And all sorts of stuff. So that's one thing that I really like about it. But before I get to questions, I just want to mention, again, visualregressiontesting.com has all sorts of articles on it. I will probably add a video here of a recording I did of this one, or maybe the video from tonight. Certain things. There's some paid tools out there that kind of take care of this for you. Percy.io is one of those. Let's see. And this is run by guy who was kind of interested in it, but it's the same basic idea. It doesn't use WebDriver I/O. I don't really know what they use. I think they might use like Phantom.js or something. Or maybe they use Selenium. They use something, but yeah, it's another option out there. It's a little bit more hands-off, so they do a lot of the work for you. But there's a bunch of different options out there. So yeah, let's open it up to questions. Question?
You'll keep like a separate repository where you store all of your...
No. Yeah, so the question is for storing the visual diffs. So I've got this folder here that's called screenshots, and do we want to store that in a separate repository because they could be a lot of files and everything? You could look into something like Git large file storage if you use Git because it is large files. I've not had that problem just because usually something gets in the way, like I have to write actual code instead of just tests and stuff before I can really implement this in a major fashion. But I do like storing it in some sort of Git repository. That way, if you do have a change and you open up a pull request, in here you could see in the pull request itself, like if you went to your files changed, you would have the image before and after, and you can review, okay, I know that my button text is getting larger, and that's something that we do want to happen, so we are going to commit it to our baseline. And with that, you probably want to write your git ignore file if you are using Git to only store the reference. You don't want to worry about the screen or the diff. Just ignore those two folders. Just store the reference. But yeah, I would definitely recommend having some sort of storage method. There's one tool out there called Spectre. Let's see if I can find it. And it's pretty neat. Let's see. It basically does the admin interface for you, and it will actually create diffs for you. So you send it the baseline image, and then you send it the comparison image with the test information on it, and it'll do your diff, and then you can actually set it as the baseline if you want to, and it'll tell you if it fails and stuff. So this one, you kind of have to have your Selenium service hooked up yourself. This just, you can send some data to and from it, images back and forth with the test information. But I thought it was pretty neat. It runs on Ruby, so pretty neat little thing there. It's a little complicated to install, but you can also just hit that deploy to Heroku and get it running. But you have to have a decent Heroku account, otherwise it recycles it, and then you lose all your data. But that'll actually store the screenshots on the server for you instead of in your local machine.
So I have a two-part question. I'm new to a lot of this. What role is Selenium playing versus what role is local playing in the process versus WebDriver I/O?
Right. Yes. So that's a really good question because it trips a lot of people up out there because there's all these different things. And just to see if this analogy works, but imagine you're trying to tell a robot how to drive to your work. So there's different parts of that. You've got the car itself, that's what's going to take you, or take the robot there. You'll call that your browser. That's like Chrome. And then you've got your instructions. So it's going to say, press the gas, go 2 miles, and then turn right, and then things like that. That's going to be WebDriver I/O. You've got the robot itself that's driving the car. That's Selenium. So that's what's interfacing with the browser. So Selenium's interfacing with the browser. WebDriver I/O is telling the robot what to do. So the robot's like reading the WebDriver I/O instructions.
But you're doing all this from the command line, like from your terminal, right? So your Selenium is you're given the directions.
Yeah. Yeah, so in here, I'm giving it directions from inside my script itself. So when I say npm test, it's going in and it's loading this file into whatever magic it is. And then Mocha, it's running it through Mocha. And Mocha is just kind of I don't know, it's like a notebook that helps you organize things. So Mocha has no idea that you're running Selenium. It has no idea that you're running WebDriver IO. All it knows is that I want to run this code, and then if I see this error message pop up, then I should fail the test. If I don't see that error message pop up and it tells me that everything's good, just say that everything's good. So that's what Mocha kind of does. And then it allows you to have these neat little like before each, after each, all these different hooks into it as well, and that as well. So that's what Mocha does. But yeah, WebDriver IO sends commands to Selenium. Selenium sends commands to the browser. The browser does its thing. The browser sometimes sends information back to Selenium. Selenium takes that information, passes it back to WebDriver IO, and then WebDriver IO will tell Mocha things are good or things are bad, kind of thing. Do you have another part of that question?
Yeah, second question, just the automation part of it. What's the output of the auto? Because I mean, you walked us through a
Right.
manual process. So.
Yeah, so this is the output of the automation, this little one passing. So that green check mark as well, but I had mentioned that there's reporters out there. There are built into WebDriver IO, if we go to reporters, all these different reporters. So we looked at the spec reporter, and this is good for visual, just manually checking it yourself. But you can also hook into JUnit, which is useful for something like Jenkins or a CI/CD server, which is basically, let's see if I have it on here. See that little check mark? That ran through Travis CI. So Travis CI built out all this stuff for us. It ran npm install for us, and then it ran this command for us. And so say this command failed. Travis CI, which is it's a CI/CD server, basically a way to run scripts outside of your local computer. If this failed, Travis CI would report back to GitHub, hey, this didn't work. Whatever change was made didn't work. So this would be a red X instead of a green check mark. And we may actually have something like that. No, I was just going to see if there was anything in here that, these are all really simple changes, so they all pretty much pass. But yeah, that's where you could get into automation, is instead of having that one passing, it would say one failing. And then this actually returns an error. So this is a status code thing that gets returned back. And see that X right there, that red X, versus no red X right here? That actually gets sent back to the computer, and the computer can say, okay, this process that I just ran exited with a bad status code. That means something bad happened, and I'm going to say that it failed. And so with something like Travis CI, they would see that, wherever that was. I think I lost it. But it would see that, and it would say, okay, bad things happened. I'm going to say that this failed. And so that's where the real automation comes in. So you could open a new pull request, and then submit your new code, and then it would run through something like Travis CI, which is a whole nother, like setting all that up. Jenkins, Travis CI, CodeShip, there's all these different services out there. Setting all that up is a lot of work with automation.
And it's triggered by a pull request.
You can manually start things yourself, or you can have it run on a clock. So every night at 11 p.m., run my test, and then I'm going to look at my reports. There's one other thing I want to show as far as reporters go. It's one called Allure, which is really cool. And if we go to their demo report, these are the reports of all the tests. So this is like all those defects. So I've got 81 failing tests. That's pretty bad. I should probably fix those today. And then it gives you some other information like the criticality, the severity of the test, and how long the test took to run. So most of them were less than a second. or 2 seconds, but there were some that ran a little bit longer, so maybe you want to fix those or take a look at them. But yeah, that's another way to kind of get this automation in there, is if I have this set up through something like Jenkins, and it runs every night on the latest code that's on there, or it just checks a production server and it checks it and all that, I can come in and see whether my tests have been passing or not, that sort of stuff. So that's where you can really get a lot of value out of it. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for listening along. We meet again next month on the 16th, 15th, 16th, 17th? 17th, maybe. The third Wednesday of the month. We may be here, we may be elsewhere. I'm trying to find if we can get a different place that's not downtown. What? 19th. Okay. And we might have Micah Godwalt talking about design patterns and Twig, something, I don't know. If y'all ever want to give a presentation, please feel free, just reach out. We have a Gitter chat room. Oh, it's not up there. So this is worth mentioning. If you have any questions, jump into our Gitter chat room. That one, not WebDriver.io. It's just a chat room where you can ask questions and say things. And that's my wife texting me. So cool. Feel free to stick around for grab pizza or whatever. Thanks for coming out.